What can I say? Please give a warm welcome to David Icke.
Very kind. Oh, very kind. Thank you very much. I'm talking for an hour and a half, which is, I'll probably get through the middle of the second sentence in an hour and a half, knowing me, because I've had the hands-on healing and I've had the crystal therapy, but I've still got verbal diarrhea, I can't shift it. And so I've been asked to ponder on this question, what is consciousness? And I've thought about it. I tell you what, there's no way of making this a kind of a square rather than a long, is it? Because the image is a square. Anyway, I've pondered on this question, what is consciousness? And I've thought about it, and I've decided that what is consciousness? It is everything. So that's it. Thanks for coming. Have a nice day. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a nice journey home. But in that one sentence, consciousness is everything, everything changes. Because our perceptions of consciousness is that it's in here somewhere and it's nowhere else. When consciousness is actually everything. So what is consciousness? It is information. All information comes from consciousness. What the hell else, or where the hell else is it going to come from? You know, the source of all information is consciousness. People say, oh, what about the information through this machine or this gadget? Well, where do you think that information has come from? Who's built the gadget? Who's had the idea for the gadget? What's been programmed to communicate through the gadget? It's all done by consciousness. Everything is consciousness. Thoughts are information. Thoughts are information. They're information for ourselves. We have a conversation with ourselves through thought. And thoughts then manifest outward and become other forms of information. Ideas, wisdom, stupidity, perceptions and reactions of all kinds are information manifesting from consciousness. Emotions are information. All that exists is information, and we communicate these thoughts through language and other forms, but the source of it all is consciousness in different states of perception. So we talk about the great information society and the great information grids. But what are they except consciousness interacting with itself? It's just a technological expression of consciousness. And we not only communicate through thoughts and consciousness in the world of the seen, but in the world of the unseen, which is almost everything that exists, by the way. And so through the generation of frequency, thoughts, emotions, they're all different frequencies depending on the thought, the emotion, and the intent behind them. We are generating these frequencies, fields we call thought and emotion, and we are interacting with the infinite field of consciousness beyond the world of the seen. So potentially we can have an information exchange, if we open our minds and allow it, between expanded consciousness going out into infinity and the five sense mind. Or we can close the five sense mind and only operate on that minute fraction of possibility. So we live in an interactive virtual reality. We affect the reality by what we put out in terms of consciousness in the forms of information in its various kinds, and we are affected by the information we receive from the whole. What is reality? Information interacting with information. And put another way, it's consciousness interacting with consciousness. Everything is consciousness, and ultimately the same consciousness. We are not our labels, we are the awareness experiencing the labels. So many people are disconnected from their true infinite self and its influence by a self-identity with labels. I am a man, I am a woman, I am black, I am white, I'm Jewish, I'm a Christian, I'm a Hindu, I'm a Muslim. These are just experiences that our consciousness is having, but we have been manipulated to self-identify with them and thus diminish our perception of the true self. We are, in fact, infinite awareness experiencing itself. And Ethel down the checkout and Bill driving the bus is simply a name for another experience that infinite awareness is having to experience itself. So what we call human or extraterrestrial or any of it is a point of attention within this infinite awareness. And how vast or narrow this point of attention we allow it to be dictates our experienced reality and collectively dictates the society in which we operate. And of course, not all consciousness points of attention are at the same level of awareness. I rest my case. So, what is consciousness? It is awareness. It is a state of being aware. Beyond all form, when you get down to the true I, it is a state of awareness. But how aware? That is what dictates everything. How aware? Because the more aware we become, the more we understand the reality we're experiencing. And if you are a manipulator that wishes to control the target population, you want to control that perception so it's as narrow as possible. And in that sentence, I've described the global conspiracy and why the few control the many. Because beyond the world of the seen, which is absolutely tiny, as I'll come to, is infinite possibility. And you try to manipulate, hoax people who are opening their minds to beyond this reality and getting insight, inspiration, awareness from beyond this world of the seen. It's a nightmare. But if you can herd people just into the world of the seen and get everyone to operate only on 5 sense levels and perceive everything through the 5 senses, then you can so control their perception that you can control them. So we can be having an experience, a point of attention called human, and interacting with this reality through what we call the 5 senses, but not be mesmerized, controlled, and limited by them, because we can open our awareness beyond the 5 senses, out into that great field of possibility and probability and potentiality, where we can get insight and understanding and intuitive knowing that the 5 senses do not provide. Or we can get so focused, so isolated in 5 sense reality alone that we self-identify with our labels as being who we are, instead of being what the true I is experiencing. Now, this point of attention also dictates our point of perception, and perception is what dictates everything, as I'll come to. That's why this whole global conspiracy is about hijacking human perception, because they know that from that everything else comes. And a point of attention and perception also becomes our point of self-identity. If we only perceive the five-sense world, and we look around us from a five-sense perspective, then everything is apart from everything else. Nothing's connected, everything's random. And we are little me, I have no power, what can I do? And it's this control of our self-identity that ultimately controls our collective reality. Because these are two perceptions of self-identity. One says, I am all that is, has been, and ever can be, having an experience called my name, my culture, my income bracket, my religion. And this says, those labels are me, it's all I am. I'm just little me, I have no power. And because I have no power, I have to look up to authority to tell me what to think and tell me what to do, because I do not have the capacity to do that, because I'm just little insignificant me. And these two, what are nothing more than perceptions, will create dramatically different experiences, because perception becomes experiences in ways I'm going to come to. And isolated consciousness, what I mean is the focus of attention is so much on the five senses that we cut off the influence of the greater self. Isolated consciousness is a manipulator's dream. That's why they want us there. Because it's perception without radar, without context. This comes into this whole UFO extraterrestrial arena too, as I'll come to. Perception without radar. If your only perception, your only influence is five-sense reality, then where are you going to look to get your fix on this reality? Who you are, where you are, what the hell is going on? You're going to look into this reality to get that information, because it's the only reality you perceive there to be. And what comes back? The education system, the media, political speeches, Silicon Valley. And that's when we become in the world and of the world, because this is the perception of this world is all there is. And you can't have context. And context is everything. Because you can see things as individual happenings and individual people, and in and of themselves they look a certain way. But connect them together and how they relate to each other, give them context, and those very same people, situation, organizations, happenings look totally different than they did before. So perception is the creator of reality. And that in the shadows, I would say ultimately non-human, knows that. And it knows that if it can control our perception, it will control our reality. Because perception is where all life is played out and all experience is made manifest. Again, for reasons I'll come to. Leonardo da Vinci said, our knowledge has its origin in our perceptions. And to a certain extent that's true, because our perceptions are dictating what knowledge or information we allow in and absorb and accept and make part of our reality, and which we reject. So that is true, but you can look at it another way, that all our perception has its origins in our knowledge, in our information. Where do these perceptions come from? They come from information received. This might take the form of a personal experience. It might take the form of the 9 o'clock news. It might take the form of some academic at a university. But from these sources of information, we construct our perception. So if you can control those sources of information, you massively impact upon people's perceptions of reality. Knowledge is from information. And from information and knowledge comes perception. And that knowledge doesn't have to be accurate, it just happens to be what you believe. And this is the key. Perceptions are frequencies. So every thought, every emotion is a frequency. It's well known now. And the nature of the thought, the nature of the emotion, the nature of the intent behind it dictates the frequency. This is why people who are in states of anxiety or depression, they say, "Oh, I feel so heavy today." Yes, because that dictates a low vibrational state, thus it feels heavy. And together, perceptions operate on different frequency bands according to the nature of the perception. So that perception of the world and self-identity will be a very narrow band of frequency. Why? Because that is reflecting a very narrow band of possibility. A narrow band of self-perception. This is vital to how we create reality, as we'll see. Now that perception of self and reality is a much more expanded, much higher frequency band. And therefore, it will manifest a different reality. And the nature of the frequency that we're operating on dictates whether we are stuck in that box, that 5 sense perceptual prison, or whether we start to access reality beyond it and start to be inspired by knowing, intuitive knowing, by insight, by an awareness beyond the 5 sense world of media and mainstream everything. As Einstein said, everything is energy and that's all there is to it. Match the frequency to the reality you want and you can't help to get that frequency. And so perception is all. And this is the gateway. This is the gateway that opens to going beyond this mind prison we call human society. Accidents happen. That's what everyone says. But in a quantum universe, there are no such things as accidents, only possibilities and probabilities folded into existence by perception. Because our perceptions and the frequencies they operate on dictate what we manifest as experience. This is Werner Heisenberg, one of the pioneers of quantum physics. He said atoms are elementary particles, themselves are not real, and they're not. They form a world of potentialities or possibilities rather than one of things or facts. This is this realm of potentialities and possibilities that we're interacting with all the time, and how we interact with it is dictated by our perception and our self-identity. This field, this infinite field of consciousness, of awareness that I'm talking about, beyond the world of the seen, is this quantum field of potentialities and possibilities. And how much we interact with that, how far we get out into it, dictates our experience and our possibility. If we perceive ourselves to be little me, me, I've got no power, everything's apart from everything else, I know my betters, I know my masters, I must obey them, then that narrow band of self-identity becomes the narrow band within which we interact with this field of potentialities and possibilities. And thus, what we manifest out of that potentiality is an experience that matches the range of and state of perception which we are interacting with that field. If you see yourself as infinite awareness, having an experience, potentiality of all that is, has been, and ever can be, then you start to interact with this quantum field of possibility and probability in a much more expanded way, a much more high frequency way, and thus the experiences and possibilities that we pull out of that field become massively expanded compared with the previous picture, because they're matching the perception of self and reality. This is why when people go through this process, many people in this room will know what I'm talking about. When they start to what's called awaken, in other words, break out of the program, they start to realize the synchronicity that suddenly comes into their lives. The amazing, quote, coincidences, the kind of miraculous things that happen. And they say, why didn't it happen before? Because you were there before. Now you're there. So the potentiality of manifestation becomes massively expanded, and it is only limited by our sense of limitation, nothing else. And you see this as a phrase I use in the books: what you believe you perceive, and what you perceive you experience. And we see it in the placebo effect, where people take a certain drug in a test and they take a sugar pill. And people on the sugar pill respond in the way the drug's supposed to have made them respond. And I've seen studies where people have been put on these blind trials, these placebo trials, for boldness remedies, and the people on the sugar pills have started growing hair. Because the placebo is a belief in the effect which becomes the effect. People go to places like Lourdes, and some of them have what are called miraculous healings through to divine intervention. But is it? Is it divine intervention, or is it a belief in divine intervention? Because our perceptions become our experienced reality. Firewalking. I've seen people, many people in this room maybe have seen it too, people walking through fire. That's impossible, mate. You can't do that. Seen it without getting burned. But if you go walk through the fire with a belief, a perception that you're going to get burned, then they'll be calling an ambulance. You'll be burned. But go into another level of reality that doesn't interact with potentiality and possibility in the same way, and you can walk through fire and not get burned, because an illusion can only burn an illusion if you perceive it can. This is the power we have that has been systematically and is systematically deleted from us, from cradle to grave. The game of life, perception is all. Bill Hicks, a great American comedian, died far too young. All matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration. We are all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. There's no such thing as death. Life is only a dream, and we are the imagination of ourselves. And our imagination of self, our perception of self, becomes our experienced self. And this is why this whole system of control is absolutely focused on hijacking our imagination of ourselves. Who creates our reality? We do, but there's a big proviso on that, which I'll come to as we go along. How do we do it? How do we create this reality? Well, when you look at computers and the internet and Wi-Fi, That is just a technological extension, a technological expression of how we create the reality we think is so real. There's probably Wi-Fi in this building, and if there is, where is it? No one can see it. And if you said to someone who knew nothing about computers or Wi-Fi or internet, in this room is a field of possibility, probability, and information that you can access anywhere in the world and pull onto a screen that anyone anywhere in the world with a computer can see. People didn't know about computers, they didn't know about Wi-Fi. They'd say, "You're mad. Where is it? My five senses cannot see it, therefore it cannot exist. Where is it?" But of course, when you get to a position today where people know about Wi-Fi, they know about computers and the internet, and you say, "You know, there's a field of information in this room, and you can get, oh yeah, Wi-Fi, yeah, I know about that. And you know the difference between load of rubbish, mate, and yeah, I know about that? Information, that's all it is." And we are interacting with this infinite field of consciousness, of possibility and potentialities in exactly the same way. And it's like cosmic Wi-Fi. And I call it also the cosmic internet. We interact with it on a waveform level, on the electromagnetic level, on the electrical level. And we manifest this world we think is so real in the same way that a computer manifests the world of the internet. People, you say to people, "What is the internet?" They would say, "It's websites and it's graphics and it's moving pictures and it's images and it's text." Yes, it is. But only on the screen. Nowhere else is the internet like that. Everywhere else, it's radiation information fields and electronic coding and all that stuff. Only on the screen does the internet we perceive as the internet exist. The only place this reality we call five-sense physical reality, the physical world, exists is in our heads, when we have decoded it in just the same basic way that a computer decodes Wi-Fi. The foundation of this reality, this construct we call the universe, this interactive reality we call the universe, is waveform information. And through the five senses, the waveform information becomes electrical information and then becomes holographic stroke digital information. As we construct a reality, just like a computer constructs that reality from Wi-Fi in our heads, the world we're convinced is outside of us, because that's how we experience it, is actually inside of us. Even words are waveform, the same process. As I'm speaking now, my vocal cords are creating waveform vibrational fields of information. Only when the hearer decodes that information from the waveform to the language that we perceive that I'm speaking now, only then do we hear the words. It's not words that pass between us. It's information fields that become words when they are decoded into language. So the waveform becomes the digital, becomes the holographic, illusory physical, and that's the reality we are experiencing. Now this, as I'll come to shortly, puts this whole extraterrestrial UFO arena into a completely different light. A light where those that have described their experiences, which from a five-sense perceptual level sound impossible and ridiculous, can be quite logically and easily explained. What are the five senses? They take waveform information, they turn it into electrical information, they communicate that to the brain, and the brain decodes that into digital and holographic information that we call the external world. These different parts of the brain specialize in decoding from different senses, and then the brain as a whole constructs this reality. This is a Western philosopher called Alan Watts, who had a lot of great things to say. I think he died in 1975. Without the brain, he said, the world is devoid of light, heat, weight, solidity, motion, space, time, or any other imaginable feature. All these phenomena are interactions or transactions of vibrations with a certain arrangement of neurons. Put another way, this isn't real. What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, taste, and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain. And what interprets those signals? Perception. And this decoding of this information is done like this. This is from a mainstream science magazine. Every second, 11 million sensations crackle along these brain pathways. The brain is confronted with an alarming array of images, sounds, and smells, which it rigorously filters down until it is left with a manageable list of around 40 from 11 million. Thus, 40 sensations per second make up what we perceive as reality. The possibilities for manipulating that reality are infinite. Losing time on an abduction, piece of cake. And I was seeing a video this week by a neuroscientist who was saying that the way the brain constructs reality in the way I'm describing is from prior expectations. What it perceives reality to be is how it will construct reality. Now that connection is so massively opening the door to perceptual manipulation. But I would go another step, and I would say, rather than prior expectations, to a very, very large extent, they are programmed expectations. Programmed expectations that come from a lifetime of programming that we call human life. This neuroscientist also said that the I, or me, is a controlled hallucination generated by the brain. Well, it might be generated by the brain or from the brain, but it's generated via the brain. Because what is the brain decoding to create this controlled hallucination? Information received. Control that, you control the hallucination. The reality that we experience is generated by information received by the brain and interpreted by perception. We keep coming back to the same word because this is the foundation of everything. So, one of these controlled hallucinations is that the world is outside of us when it's here all along. And if you can manipulate a computer to dictate what it takes from the Wi-Fi field and puts on the screen, so you can do the same with humanity if you know what you're talking about. This is Max Planck, another pioneer of quantum theory. I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. Personally, I regard matter as an illusion caused by its particular frequency and the way that we decode it. But this is gives you an idea of how crazy it is. This is by a scientist called Robert Lanza in a book called Biocentrism. And he's describing what happens for us to see a candle and a flame, just a simple thing like that. The flame, he said, is emitting photons or tiny packets of electromagnetic energy, each pulsing electrically and magnetically. These invisible electromagnetic waves strike a human retina, and if and only if the waves happen to measure between 400 and 700 nanometers in length from crest to crest, then their energy is just right to deliver a stimulus to the 8 million cone-shaped cells in the retina. Each in turn send an electrical pulse to a neighbor neuron, and up the line this goes at 250 miles per hour until it reaches the optical lobe of the brain. This is the back of the brain that decodes visual reality, in the back of the head. There, a cascading complex of neurons fire from the incoming stimuli, and we subjectively perceive this experience as a yellow brightness occurring in a place we have been conditioned to call the external world. The reality that we think we're experiencing is nothing like what we're really experiencing. Does a falling tree make a noise? Only if you hear it. What? That's crazy. No, it's not. Because when a falling tree makes a noise, just as my voice becoming words has to have a decoder, receiver to do that, another person, so the tree falls, what it does is disturb the energetic field and create a vibrational disturbance. If there's no one there, then it makes no noise. If there's someone there, that disturbance is decoded by the hearing senses into electrical form, sent to the brain, and the brain hears the sound of what we call a tree falling. Now, put all this together, and suddenly these apparently fantastic, impossible descriptions of experiences by people who say they've interacted with extraterrestrial beings, entities, takes on a whole new level of simple explanation. Everything we call real, said Niels Bohr, another great pioneer of quantum physics. Everything we call real is made of things that cannot be regarded as real. This is an atom. We're told that atoms make up the physical world, and that's why it's physical. The atom has no solidity. You've got the nucleus, you've got the electrons going around it, and the space between them is absolutely fantastic. The space that is depicted on this screen is only there to get it on the screen. In truth, it is vastly greater than that. Atoms that have no solidity, and in the end, if you go deep enough, the nucleus and the electrons have no solidity, cannot a solid world make. But it doesn't have to, because the world isn't solid. Currently, I am walking around in my own head, my own perception, my own controlled hallucination. Here's a great quote. If the nucleus of an atom were the size of a peanut, the atom would be about the size of a baseball stadium. If we lost all the dead space inside our atoms, we would each be able to fit into a particle of dust, and the entire human race would fit into the volume of a sugar cube. There is no physical, only the decoded perception of it. What we call physical reality is holographic, that actually is not outside of us, that appears to be, we appear to experience it like that. It's inside of us. Human life is like watching an interactive virtual reality movie. The question is, are we going to watch it with a headset on and see it in the way that those that wish to dictate events want us to see it? Or are we going to open our awareness and see it in the panorama beyond that, and thus look back at this world and go, it's a piece of shit. Yes, exactly what it is. A hoax, an illusion. And what is happening when people play these sophisticated computer games? They are hacking into the same 5 sense decoding process through which we create our reality. Through the headset, through the gloves, through the headphones. The brain is being hijacked. Its information source, its normal information source, is being overridden, and thus it creates a reality which, as technology expands and expands, is getting closer and closer and closer to the reality that we're experiencing as the world. And these computer games can seem so amazingly real because the brain has been hijacked using the same basic processes that we create this reality from. And like I say, the more sophisticated they become, the more real they become. And people can be inserted into our reality through this virtual reality. Anything can. So maybe these people that describe their experiences with non-human entities may not be as crazy as the five senses would perceive them to be. The physics of of computer games is the same basic physics as our reality. The internet, computer games, all these things are technological mirrors, plagiarizations of reality as we are decoding it. And there's a reason for that. That's just my opinion. I've had it for a very, very long time. That this level of five-sense reality is actually a simulation. And this is not so much a world as an information source which we are decoding into an apparent world. And because it's a simulation, it's not natural, it's being created, I suggest, by a non-human force that I write about in my books. And this is why when people say, well, if we create our own reality, how can I see them lights? And everyone sees them lights, and everyone sees this, and everyone sees this car, everyone sees this house. Because we are decoding this basic construct we call the world in the same way that we decode computer games. And you're not going to see it if you're in this world and of it. All you're going to have is that information source to try to get a fix on what the information source is, i.e. the world we're experiencing. When you expand your perceptions, your consciousness beyond the program, beyond the frequency limitation of the program, then you start to get insights into this world. You might not go out there and look back and see it, but you hear somewhere, just know, perceive, have insight, understanding, intuitive knowing about the world that you live in, because you are not totally being controlled by information received by this simulation. The five sense level is, if that's all we operate on. So this is the real world that people talk about, which is not real at all. And so when people talk about the fact that they were beamed up on some beam of light into a ship, then people react. Again, it's all about information. It's like the Wi-Fi. Oh, load of rubbish. Oh, yeah, I understand that, yeah. If you believe the world is physical and solid, and the human body is physical and solid, then first of all, anything, for instance, like shape-shifting, impossible. Once you realize it's not solid, it's an information field, and you can have hybrid information fields which are different, what we would call genetic forms, then you can move between the two, and to the observer, as they decode that information field, in here, it appears that you have shifted from one shape to another. And people say, you can't do that, you can't go from a solid body to a solid body. No, you can't. But there is no solid. It's all information fields being decoded. And so, when people say a physical body cannot be taken up into a ship on a beam of light, but there is no physical. Thus, anything becomes possible once you realize that. And keeping people in the dark means people are going to dismiss things that are happening because they cannot perceive how they could happen. This is mainstream science. We can't understand how it can happen, so it can't be happening. Anyone in the UFO extraterrestrial research arena will know that one. Instead of looking at something and say, well, look at the evidence, it is happening, so how is it happening? Which is what people with true intelligence do. And this is how ridiculous it is, this reality. How illusory it is. The observer decodes it. This is a mainstream media story. Your entire life, because more and more stories are coming out, even from some areas of mainstream science now, that are saying this, your entire life is an illusion. New test backs up theory that the world doesn't exist until we look at it. There's another word I'll use instead of look at it in a second. Quantum mechanics states reality doesn't exist until it's measured. I would say this reality does not exist until it's decoded. And the process of focus, the process of what they call looking, activates that process of decoding. Just like the falling tree makes no noise, this reality, when it's not being decoded, is a waveform information construct. Your mind can control matter, says physicist. Atomic particles were shown to be also waves, which so many scientists were bamboozled by. How can something be a particle and a wave? Well, because it's a wave, and then it is decoded by the act of observation, focus, and becomes a particle. But they're just two aspects of the same information. Whether they manifested as waves or as particles, this story says, depending on whether someone was looking, decoding. Observation influenced physical reality of the particles. In more technical language, observation collapsed the wave function. Decoding collapses the wave function into the holographic world that we think is outside of us. They call it the observer effect in science. I would call it the decoder effect. Now, this is a Nobel physicist, John Wheeler. No phenomenon is a real phenomenon until it is an observed phenomenon, a decoded phenomenon. Until then, it's a waveform information field. And the crazy thing, too, is that all this is going on in a narrow band of frequency, so tiny, it's laughable. The amount of infinite reality, i.e. infinite consciousness, that we can perceive is ridiculous to the point of insanity. According to mainstream science, the electromagnetic field, what we call light, is 0.005% of what exists in the universe. Some say it's a bit more, but not much. And all the rest, the scientists talk about dark energy and dark matter. I don't actually buy that explanation in the detail that they present it, but it's safe to say that all but a tiny fraction of reality, this universe included, is not seen by us. And even more hilarious is that within the 0.005%, all we can see of that is that sliver we call, or scientists call, visible light. That is the only world that we can perceive through the five senses. And if we stay in those five senses and perceive only that, we get our perceptions from that, brackets, deeply limited, our perception of self-identity from that, brackets, deeply limited, and we end up in a frequency box of perception while infinity lies beyond it. And so, because we can see such a narrow band of frequency, again, when people say, look, I saw this UFO, it just appeared out of nowhere. And then it disappeared out of nowhere into nowhere. Oh, somebody says, oh, this entity appeared in front of me, and out of nowhere, I mean, it didn't come here, this was just there. And then it disappeared. 5 cents, press enter, because that's what it is. Information, press enter, get the reaction, the program reaction. That's ridiculous. You can't just appear and disappear. Well, if you appear or enter the frequency band that people are decoding into what we call the visual world, then they will not be decoding you, They enter, now suddenly they're decoding you. To the observer, they've come out of bloody nowhere. They haven't at all. They've entered the frequency band that we can see. Same when they leave. Same thing. Again, these things are simply explainable, but only with any kind of basic understanding of reality. And that's why this system does not want us to understand this. They want us to think this is all physical, this is all real, it's all outside of us, because then we will waft our hands away constantly saying, not possible, that can't happen, that's ridiculous. Why are we enslaved by illusion? Because there's nothing wrong with illusions, decoded illusions. Illusions only control us when we think they're real and believe they're real. When we know they're illusions and we're decoding them, we can play with them, we can have fun with them. The reason that these illusions are enslaving us is because they're meant to. I can't go into this now because I want to stay on this subject today. But there is a web of human control that ultimately goes into the realms beyond this realm of human sight, into the unseen realms, and has a non-human origin, a non-human spider at the center of the web, if you like, and then comes into our reality in the form of bloodline families, secret societies, and so on, which are dictating events in the world of the seen. And the whole foundation of this control is control of perception for all the reasons that I'm talking about. Who creates our reality? We do, but we do in the sense that our brain decodes, interprets reality. But it interprets reality on the basis of information received. Thus, whoever controls the information received, if it's not filtered by an awakened conscious mind, dictates the perceptions on which the brain decodes and structures and constructs this controlled hallucination. And if you can hijack what information people receive, you hijack their perceptions, you hijack the way they decode reality, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And of course, until relatively recently, scientists thought, because what you get with scientists, what we know is, and what you mean, mate, is what you think you know is now, and you'll know something else later. What we know is, they said, once the brain is formed, then that's how it is. Now they realize that's not only nonsense, the opposite is the case. Because of something called brain placidity, where the brain changes, rewires itself on the basis of what? Information received. This is why all this smart technology in all its forms is changing the human brain, because it's a vastly different information source to what was there before. And therefore, if you through your life are continually receiving the same information, the same perception of reality, your brain will rewire and reroute itself to constantly create that self-fulfilling prophecy. Got your perceptions, got you. And this is why human life, when you look at it from outside of the illusion, is one big program to impose a perception which imposes an experienced reality. I call it the tunnel vision program, among other things, not for a family audience. It's a prison for our mind, a prison for our perception. And I also call it the postage stamp consensus. Because what it is a narrow band of possibility. And what do you need to interact in an expanded way with the fields of possibility and potentialities? You need an expanded sense of the possible. What this postage stamp consensus is a squeezing of the possible. And from cradle to grave, that's basically all the information that people ever hear or see. And thus it becomes their normal. Everybody knows that, mate. And the postage stamp consensus can be also described as unquestioned belief. We receive this information from cradle to grave, from parents, and from the education system and the media and all this, and peer pressure. And if we don't question it, that unquestioned belief, perception coagulates, solidifies into a lifelong perception of possibility. And another part of this postage stamp consensus hoax is familiarity, which also is an expression of unquestioned belief. When something becomes familiar, it is no longer questioned. It becomes a gimme. It becomes an everyone knows that. It becomes of, this is the real world, mate. But when you question the familiar, and I've been doing that for 30 years, my God, it does not stand up to scrutiny, because it's a hoax, the vast majority of it. And the idea is to keep people walking from cradle to grave within the band of perception of this postage stamp consensus, never deviating either way. And one of the reasons that they do not want people to have confirmation beyond question of extraterrestrial interactions with planet Earth is because imagine what would happen to human perception of possible, human perception of self-identity and reality if suddenly people realize beyond any doubt that there was extraterrestrial life out there. I look at the night sky personally every night and I go, I think there's a chance. Because what would happen? You'd be off in all directions. Postage stamp consensus would be dead and buried in a day. And that is the conveyor belt we are supposed to stay on from cradle to grave. What consumes your mind controls your life. And this whole system of control is about consuming our minds with complete fricking bollocks. Which may explain why we have so often a world that syncs with that. So we come out of the womb, our parents who've been through the system we're about to go through start to influence our perceptions. In a very short time, we go to school and college, a university, and the state postage stamp consensus is downloaded day after day after day after day after year after year after decade after decade. And then you go out of the world of school and you go into the world of work, and instead I must do what the teacher says becomes I must do what the boss says. And then you have a family and produce some other offspring that you start to program in the same way that you were. And then eventually you drop off the end, either into oblivion or into the recycling bin called reincarnation. And this is the whole point of that from the system's point of view. Ultimately, I suggest, controlled by a non-human force. Get them in, get them confused, get them out, and get another lot in at the other end. It's a program. Control of information leads to control of perception, and control of perception leads to control of experience. And at the deeper levels of this construct of control, they absolutely know that, and that's why they work so hard with the postage stamp consensus to keep us from knowing that. And this is why we're seeing the concentration of information received by people now in the hands of these internet giants that are nothing more than fronts for the Pentagon and the intelligence networks. And that's why they're trawling all this information. Even people who are challenging it says, oh, it's because they want to make money from advertising. That's only one small level of it. They want data because they are fronts for this Pentagon intelligence machine. And the idea is to make sure they control, ultimately, in the end, all information that people receive. Shutting down the alternative media, in the end, even shutting down much of what we call the mainstream media. It's happening. Newspapers going out of business because of this. Because they know if they can control the information we receive and the information we don't receive, then they control us. So we are consciousness, ultimately infinite consciousness, expressions, points of attention of that consciousness interacting with itself. But everything changes if we realize that. No more fault lines to divide us of religion and income bracket and color and race, because we're all one consciousness having different experiences. We must be kept apart, we must be kept at war with each other, and thus we must identify with the labels that divide us. That's how it works. And you start them young. Start them young, get them for life. This is why the young are being targeted more than anyone else by this stuff that's going on now. Imprisoned by education, which is nothing more than a download of the system's version of reality that they want people to believe for their entire human experience. Get them to focus only on 5 sense reality. Don't let them ask questions, and then test them in exams to make sure they've accepted the download. And if Johnny or Jane will not accept the download and start asking questions, it's, hello, yeah, it's Mrs. Brown, the headmistress. We've got a problem with Johnny and Jane. Yeah, what's that? They're asking questions. We can't allow it because they'll all want to do it. And this is why. You must accept the download. Study shows kids are born creative geniuses, but the education system destroys imagination, exactly what it's meant to do. It's a programming operation. And of course, people that go through the program, even young people, and accept it and download it, they then pressure others who don't want to download it, who see the world differently, as strange or mad, and they give them a hard time for the crime of being different. I've experienced it just a little bit. I don't care. Say what you bloody like. You'll be saying something else tomorrow, mate. You must believe what we do. We've given our minds away. We've given our perceptions away. Why should you have a mind of your own and think for yourself? Disgusting. We're imprisoned by conformity. Oh, you must conform. What will the neighbors think? Don't give a shit, mate. Imprisoned by surviving, getting through life. If you can force people or pressure people to have to serve your system to earn the money to survive, then you got them. And so the imprisonment really is imprisoned by perception, which means perceptual imprisonment by the postage stamp consensus. Something that we must start to unravel, because that is how we got into this state of mass human control. So here we are, living, experiencing in this vast, infinite forever of consciousness, of potentiality, of possibility, of limitlessness. But we perceive a tiny, tiny fraction of it. And anyone that goes outside of it and perceives differently is called mad, bad, or dangerous. And of course, this postage stamp consensus goes out from the educational institutions, because you pass exams by telling the postage stamp what it wants to hear, and you go off into the world of medicine and politics and the corporate world of journalism, of science, of academia, and you take with you that core programming of normal, that perception of how things are and self-identity. And these institutions are all peopled by those that come through that system. And they confirm to each other that that's how things are. Journalists don't go to alternative healers to talk about health. They go to a doctor who will give them the postage stamp version of medicine. They won't go to someone who studies reality with an open mind. They'll go to a scientist who will give them the Stone Age song sheet version of science. And so it's a self-perpetuating religion. Because that's what it is. I mean, religion, people talk about religion, and on one level this is true. It's churches and mosques and synagogues and temples, and it's belief systems and Christianity and Hinduism and Judaism and Islam. But actually they're all the same, and they're only one level of religion, as I'll come to. But let's think about this. The scale to which humanity will allow itself to be programmed in its perception of reality. We are saying, many are accepting, that, although much of it they don't realize, that we are operating within a tiny sliver of 0.005% of the perceived energy, etc., that exists in the universe. And yet, what the religions say is all you need to know to live your life and understand the world and yourself is between the covers of a single book within a tiny sliver of 0.005%. Personally, I think there's probably more to know than that. I just feel it in my water. But the fact is that people to think that that's true. Why? Why do Muslim people born into Muslim families invariably become Muslims? Why do people born into Jewish families invariably become followers of Judaism? Why do people born into the southern states of America invariably become Christians? Begins with P, programming. It's all they've ever bloody heard. So their brain becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of belief and perception. And thus, clearly, as I've just explained, they will then in that state believe any bloody thing. And religion, like I say, is greater than just bricks and mortar and temples and churches. All these things are religions. This is the dictionary definition of religion. Scrupulous conformity, a system of belief held to with ardor and faith. On that basis, mainstream medicine is a religion. Academia and education is a religion. Politics is a religion. And science is a religion. They're all religions because they're all scrupulously conforming to a system of belief held with ardor and faith, and often no friggin' evidence. And so, politicians, let me tell you what we should do. Postage stamp minds telling us what we should do. I'm an academic, let me tell you what to believe. I'm a scientist, let me tell you what reality is, and the funniest one of all, I'm a journalist, let me tell you what's going on. I love it. They are all followers and priests in the postage stamp religion. If the blind lead the blind, both shall fall into the ditch. We've got to stop following the blind and start opening our eyes to what we see, not what they tell us to see. In the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Therefore, if you can get the target population to believe in this narrow band of postage stamp reality, while you understand how reality really works, you, although you're a few, are in a position of enormous power to control the people held in the headlights of the hoax. And all that I'm describing is what people ironically call living in the real world. And now we're moving to the next stage. I'll mention this briefly. The next stage, which is control of reality using artificial intelligence. And where is this coming out of? The same Pentagon intelligence network, hidden hand web, Silicon Valley, which is hijacking the control of information and which is trawling the personal data of the global population. The idea, and they're openly telling us, because the sales pitch is it will make us superhuman, it will make us posthuman and subhuman, is that we must be connected through brain technology interfaces to artificial intelligence. And so artificial intelligence becomes the human mind. No more the need to control information then, to manipulate perception which dictates experience. No need, because AI becomes our perception. Directly, no manipulation necessary. So how do we escape this mind prison? It's actually not as difficult as it's imagined. We disconnect from the program. We stop getting our perceptions, our beliefs, our senses of reality from the mainstream everything. Because in the end, the mainstream everything, science, medicine, politics, all of it, goes up the pyramid or into the center of the web, whichever analogy you want, and you hit the same force which is dictating through all of them. So while there are enlightened individuals within these organizations who are not happy with what is happening, the institutions themselves are ultimately controlled by the same force, therefore operating to the same agenda. And one of those agendas is to keep from people the existence of non-human life for the reasons that I've talked about and many more. Now, if this is how we got into this mess, people say, what are the solutions? I'm not bothered about solutions. Solutions are a waste of frickin' time. If you look at the history of solutions, they usually lead to more problems in pursuit of more solutions. The way to remove something you don't like is not to find a solution, it's to remove the cause of the problem. And then it disappears, because it cannot manifest if the cause has disappeared. It cannot. And if that is the problem, that is removing the cause of the problem. Taking our minds back, taking our perceptions back, becoming people who are their own perceivers of reality and not a computer interface with someone else's. Because this is a perception of possibility and limitation that has held us in servitude for what is called, there's more to know about that, known human history. And if we go on doing this, if we go on looking up to our betters and our masters, then by not removing the cause of the problem will not disappear, because you're still generating it. By changing our self-identity From I am my labels to I am infinite awareness, all that is, has been, and ever can be, having an experience of my labels, everything changes. That expansion of sense of identity manifests itself in an expansion of frequency, an expansion of the range and nature of that frequency, and thus the way we interact with possibility and potentiality and manifest a different experience. We are interpreting information into a world, thus we control that interpretation if we control our perceptions, which lead to interpretation. When we start seeing ourselves, living ourselves, being ourselves as consciousness, a state of awareness, having an experience, a transitory experience in a tiny range of frequency, instead of self-identifying with the experience, everything changes. Because our perceptions have gone through an explosion of expansion. Thus, our interaction with possibility and probability must go through the same explosion of interaction. Thus, what we can manifest goes through an explosion of new possibility. This is what happens when we get caught in the postage stamp of little me and the five senses alone. My life is such a mess. I don't understand everything. Why is this happening to me? When you take the headset off, take the postage stamp off, take the programming off and start again. So that's who I really am and have always been. Why don't I see the world like everyone else? There's a fella up there has taken the headset off. People in this room will know this one. What happens when you take the headset off? You're bloody mad. I'm ever so worried about Billy. He's gone very strange. Talking about extraterrestrials now and conspiracies. I'm ever so worried. Get the doctor, put him on a pill. Very strange. And people around you, peers, people at work, ooh, he's very strange. Oh, don't be daft. And we have to accept that. I've had 30 years of it, and you can take it and you can just breeze through it, because forgive them, for they know not what they do. If you're seeing only through the five senses, then you'll see the world in a certain way, and we have to understand that they will, and thus they'll think we're crazy and they'll think we're mad. But it doesn't matter, because what matters surely is that we pursue the truth of what's happening rather than conform to someone else's truth just for a quiet life. I have this saying, the price of sanity is sanity, because the price of sanity in a world that's to such a large extent an expression of insanity can be a challenge, but only if we make it so. See, people say to me, oh, you've had a challenging life. No, well, I said to someone before, I was walking through Manchester yesterday, or day before, and I saw people in wheelchairs. I saw people with no legs. I saw blind people. And I've had a challenging frickin' life. Are you having a laugh? And what challenge? Again, interacting with perception and potentiality. Who decides if I've had a challenging life or not? I do. If I care what other people think of me, if I care about the abuse and the ridicule, I am deciding to be a victim of that. I choose not to be. Thus, the challenge is with me, not with the abuser. The price of sanity may be sanity, but sanity is a gift, not a ball and chain unless we make it so. The only real revolution is a revolution of perception. Every other revolution has just led down the same road. You've been down that road, Neil. You know where it leads. And where postage stamp revolutions lead is eventually to more postage stamp revolutions going nowhere. This is the question. Are we going to continue as a human race with a self-identity of little me, or a self-identity that little me is only a perception, not a reality? And we can also have a self-identity of the vastness of forever. The real I is simply awareness, a state of being aware, and potentially it can be as expansive as infinite reality itself, or it can be imprisoned. And it's this awareness beyond form and all these things that actually in part leaves the body at what we call death. And it's if you look at endless, or God knows how many stories now worldwide about near-death experiences, and the common themes, the idea that death is the end is it's beyond a frickin' joke. But what happens is that this awareness becomes entrapped in bubbles of perception, what I call I am Mars, I am Ma man, I am Ma woman, I am Ma Muslim, I am Ma Hindu, I am Ma CEO, I am Ma bus driver, I am ours. And this creates this focus of attention, becomes our perception, the bubble program, created by accepting all these sources of information as how things are. They are not. And along with that comes this arrogance bubble, where anyone outside the bubble saying, actually, there's more to know, they are dismissed with a wave of the hand. You're ridiculous, you're mad. This is how we got into this situation, because that bubble program is a perception of frequency, and it becomes a frequency likewise of experience. Open our minds to the true self, and the both become massively, massively more expanded. So what has happened? Because in the shadows, not least this non-human force knows how all this works and just wants to keep us from it. We have had our perception hijacked, and through that, this force is dictating our frequency and thus dictating our experience. As the Buddha is supposed to have said, the mind that perceives the limitation is the limitation. That is the only limitation that exists. Limitation is a perception of limitation. My life will never change. While I believe it will never change, it never will. You know why? Because it can't. Were we really born to just work, pay the bills and die? If we believe that is how things are, then that is how things will be. But they don't have to be. Limitless possibility is a perception of no limits. It's all us that are doing this. Oh, I get it. It was me all along. Yes, that is the golden truth that will set us free of this nonsense where we think that we're not in control, but someone else is. We are creating our reality. They just don't want us to know that. If we don't look in the mirror, everyone else is always to blame, and that's a massive part of this. They want us to blame everybody, because while we're blaming everyone, we're missing the point of what's creating what we're blaming other people for. So I talk about this conspiracy and the people behind it, yes, but we're responsible. A relative handful of people, non-human or not, cannot control 7.5 billion unless the 7.5 billion give their power away, their perceptions away to the few. It can't happen. Little me, low frequency, limited feedback loop with all possibility. Infinite me, high frequency, expanded feedback loop with all possibility. Everything is energy, and that's all there is to it. Match the frequency to the reality you want, and you can't help but get that reality. And because of this feedback loop, if you take shit, you'll get shit. That's how it works. The perception that you have to take shit means you will take shit. When you say, I'm not having it anymore, I'm not decoding that reality, I'm not having it, I'm not taking shit, I will not take it, then you don't get it. If you think you can or think you can't, either way, you're right. Because of this process. And we've had some posters made. I think these should be on the wall of every house and building in the world. Change perception and you change reality. So often people want their reality to change. They want their reality to change, but they won't change their perception of reality. Therefore, their reality never changes because it can't. We decode our experience, and therefore we need to take control of that process of manifestation of this so-called controlled hallucination. And that means getting out of the intellect. Not getting out of it altogether so we don't interact with it at all, but we stop it being the master. Because the intellect has taken over the human mind to the point where the intellect is perceived as the great arbiter of cleverness and wisdom and genius. It is not. Albert Camus said, an intellectual is someone whose mind watches itself. Why? Because the intellect operates in the realm of the five senses, and thus it is in the world and of it, and goes round and round and round, disappearing up its own arse. It's in the program and of the program, and thus consumed and controlled by the program. This whole system is dominated by what? Has its decisions made by what? The intellect. And so they want to put kids in the intellect from the earliest possible age, and then keep people in it for the rest of their lives, in the prison of the mind. Get them in, get them confused, get them out. And keep them in fear, which keeps us in a low vibrational state. Thus our interactions with possibility and probability interact on that low vibrational state. But there is a great escape. There is a great escape from this merry-go-round, this carousel where we think we can catch the horse in front, but we can't because the system's rigged. And the way that we escape is not to try to catch the horse in front. We say bollocks to the merry-go-round. I'm not having it anymore. A famous Native American Black Elk said, at the center of the universe dwells the Great Spirit. And that center is really everywhere. It is within each of us. I would go beyond the universe, which is just a part of infinite forever. And I would say that infinite awareness in an awareness of itself, that level of awareness in awareness of its own infinity is everywhere. And we only have to open our minds to connect with it. Why? Because we are it. We have just forgotten. And to get to that point, we need to get out of the head. Domination of the head and the intellect. So the intellect serves our consciousness instead of being its master and its arbiter of all. Out of the head and into the heart, which interacts with the infinite possibility and probability on a completely different level to the head. This is why they want us to close our hearts. This is why they don't want us to follow our knowing, our intuition, which comes from this energy center. They want us in here, because then they got us. The human brain has two hemispheres. which, although the brain is holographic, so everything is everywhere, but there are areas of specialization. The left brain and the right brain do not see reality the same. The right brain is much closer to the heart, and the left brain is well outside of the heart's perception of reality in the program world we live in today. The left side of the brain decodes reality to see the little picture, to see everything as apart from everything else. Its method of communication is thought, and its center of operations is the five senses. It's the scientist, the academic, the politician, the journalist, the system thinker. It is the home of the postage stamp. The right brain sees connections. It sees, therefore, the big picture. It sees not pixels, it sees pictures. It sees connections. You cannot understand the world from the left brain because it seems as everything is apart from everything else. You can only understand the world through the right side of the brain, which sees how everything is ultimately connected. Its method of communication is intuition, knowing. And its area of operation are the higher senses. It is the artist, it is the creative, it is the out-of-the-box people. It is imagination. It is the maverick who will not be conformed into being like everyone else. And where is the education completely and utterly focused on? The subjects of education, the nature of how it works, is overwhelmingly, almost entirely targeting the left brains of children to put them in that intellectual prison from the earliest possible age. And the way to overcome that and to activate the right side of the brain is through the heart. Heart consciousness, love, wisdom, perspective, context. There's an organization in America called the Institute of Heart Math, which specializes in researching and studying the power of the heart. Not the physical heart, though they are connected, but this energetic vortex heart in the center of the chest. And they say the heart field is 100,000 times more electrically powerful than the brain and 5,000 times more magnetically powerful. What that says in another language and another context is more electrically powerful, more magnetically powerful. It means more expanded in its awareness, more expanded in its perception, more expanded in its understanding. The head thinks. It's a very low level of operation, thinking. Thinking thinks because it doesn't know. That's why it thinks and has to work things out. The belly feels, in this world of manipulation, often feels low vibrational emotions much of the time. But the heart knows. And the heart knows because it's connected to that level of consciousness that does know. And thus, when we talk about intuition, we don't say my intuition thinks. We say my intuition knows. And look at the body language. Where do we point to when we say, I'm thinking, I'm thinking, I'm thinking? Where do our hands go when we say, I know, I just know? Instinctively to that point of interaction with expanded reality, which does frickin' know. People think too much and so know too little. And that's the idea, and always has been. Einstein said, I never made one of my discoveries through the process of rational thinking. No, his mind wandered out into the infinite possibility of potentiality and possibility, and that's where the inspiration came from. This is where all the great people who were said to be ahead of their time, that's where they go to. Because they're not ahead of their time. They're outside of time and this construct in which time is a fundamental part of the hoax. Thinking is bubble perception, creates division, apartness, because that's how it perceives the frickin' world. Knowing, the heart knows we're all one, and thus perceives that to be the case. Low frequency, head to head. High frequency, heart to heart. And amazing how we talk about people in terms of heart. Absolutely. How is your heart open? How is it not? We talk about people having a big heart, being heartless, having a cold heart. And what is heartless? What does heartless mean? It means that this vortex is closed down and the head is in total control of perception. And those people we call psychopaths. And the hair test of psychopathic traits is headed by no empathy. Then comes no remorse, no shame, parasites, pathological liars, do whatever it takes to get what we want. And they are the character traits of those that control human society that we now call the 1% or the elite. Why? Because they have closed hearts. Thus, they have no emotional consequence for anything they do. And they want to draw us into that same state of being. Thus, as the Native Americans said, there are two wolves inside people. One is the head. It is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. That is where they want humanity to be. But there is the heart. It is joy, it is love, peace, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion. And as the Native Americans say, which wolf wins? The one you feed the most. And our society is structured to feed that. And we have to stop doing it. Otherwise, this world will never change. And in most people, there is this war between the heart and the head that goes on and on and on. What does your heart say? Oh, my head says this. Oh, you can't do that. Oh, no, what will my mother think? What will the people at work think? And what we need is this heart-brain balance in this world, but not of it. And that's the route home. And this is let me just set this up before I go any further. There's a Native American prophecy, there's an ancient prophecy about the time in the latter part of the 15th century when the head would take over. But there was a time, this prophecy says, in the 1990s, when the heart will start to return. And this briefly is just a description of what that prophecy says.
Back in the midst of history, human societies decided to go on two different paths. One was the path of the condor, which is really the path of the heart, of the intuition. And the other was the path of the eagle, which is the path of the mind, of the science, of the industrial. And they went their separate routes. It was prophesied that during what is known as the 8th Pachacuti, Pachacuti is a 500-year period, which would begin in the 1490s, the eagle peoples would become so powerful that they would practically drive the condor people into extinction. But the prophecy goes on to say that during the next 500-year interval, beginning in the 1990s, we would arrive at a time with the potential for the two to come together, for the eagle and the condor to fly in one sky, to dance together, and to create a whole new level of consciousness. And so it's up to us to make it happen.
I only saw that a few months ago, and it took my mind back to when I wrote this book, when I had the experiences that led to this book, Truth Vibrations. And it happened in 1990. And when the top of my head blew off, and the Wogan show and all that, in fact, the year before that, before it all went public, I met a series of psychics. One I went to see because I decided to go to see her, but the others were just synchronistically coming into my life. I thought I lived in a world of psychics at the time for about 2 months. And there was a common theme that I was told through all these different people, that there was a vibrational change coming, that was going to wake humanity up from its slumber, that was going to wake it up from this coma that we've been put in. And that at the same time, as people started to tease open their minds more and more obviously, all that had been hidden would be revealed to us. This vibration would bring everything to the surface that had been hidden so we could see it at last. That's why I gave the name to the book, The Truth Vibrations. And when I look back at 1990, when I came across this, there was no evidence whatsoever that this was happening or would happen. And now I look at the world from the perspective of 2018, and my own journey now of, consciously anyway, of 30 years nearly. And what I was told would happen is happening. Look at what we know now that we didn't know in 1990. Look at what we didn't know 5 years ago, 2 years ago, and more. Look at the number of people who are questioning reality and questioning the world and world events like never before. And not just in terms of numbers, but in terms of the kind of people who are suddenly seeing it or starting to see it. It's because this vibrational change is starting to manifest more and more and more obviously. And so when things look bleak, and if you only see them through the 5 sense mirror, the 5 sense filter, they look bleak, but they're not. We're in the process of the immovable force looking into the eye of the apparently immovable object. But the immovable object, this conspiracy to control human society, is not immovable. But the force that's now beginning to manifest in the hearts and minds of more and more people is irresistible. And we need to move from the thinking about it to the doing it. Because we'll never change the world by being what we want to change. We have to be what we want the world to be. And realize individually and collectively that it is us, and it has been all along. And what a power that is. The only control is the control we perceive to be control. The real control, the real power is within all of us. And postage stamp revolutions are going to change nothing. Violent action becomes a violent world, and that's why revolution creates more and more of the same. And we need to realize that our response dictates what happens next. If we sit by and keep quiet and just complain about what's happening, but don't stand up and scream it from the rooftops, don't do everything we can to alert people to what's going on. If we quietly acquiesce because we fear what other people might think or what authority might do, then that response will lead to more of the same. When we say, I'm not having it anymore. I'm all that is, has been, and ever can be, having an experience. What's the worst that can happen? I am a point of attention, swimming and streaming through infinite reality forever. And I'm worried about what this guy might do, what this person might say. Are you kidding? And we have to realize again, this is why this information is so important, that while we may look different and we may have different colors and cultures and religions, we're all one consciousness having different experiences. And then when we realize that, the fault lines will fall, because the few can only control the many by dividing and ruling the many and setting them at war with itself. When you say to someone, who are you? What will they give you? They'll give you a list of labels. that they have self-defined themselves by. How often do you see people say, hello, nice to meet you, who are you? Oh, I'm infinite consciousness, all that has been, ever can be. And you say, oh, yeah, so am I thought I recognized you. What a different way of perceiving the world. Instead of fighting each other for dominance of what? Of a transitory experience. The human condition in one word, unconscious. The answer in two, becoming conscious beyond the program of mind. I woke up. What does that mean, I woke up? People say, I'm seeking enlightenment. I'm waking up. What's the point in seeking something you already are? We are already enlightened. We already are an expression of all that is, has been, and ever can be. What waking up means is nothing more than removing the onion skins of programming that control our perception and keep us in a state of perceptual limitation. This is the control system for life. This is how we get out of this mess, and far quicker than anyone can ever imagine. This is the revolution, and its time has come. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.